So again, I would like to welcome all of you and our special guest, Professor Hendrik Scholl, Editor-in-Chief of Ophthalmic Research, to our first Open Access Week Karger event. So Bethany, as Science Task Force, we wanted to celebrate the International Open Access Week in a different way, doing something a little bit more special than some social media posts. So we decided to organize this event today, which will be divided into two parts. Firstly, we're going to have an interview with Professor Scholl, and then we are going to have our first open access and open science pub quiz, where Beth is going to explain a little bit more in detail the whole procedure and how to answer the questions. So now for the first part of the event, I would like to introduce you Professor Hendrik Scholl. He is currently the co-director of the Institute of Molecular and Clinical Ophthalmology in Basel, IAB. He also had a brilliant international career, picked as co-director of the Johns Hopkins Center for Stem Cell and Ophthalmic Regenerative Medicine in Baltimore, USA. Dr. Scholl specializes in medical and surgical management of retinal diseases, especially monogenetically and genetically complex macular and retinal degenerations. He's also doing a fantastic job as editor-in-chief of Ophthalmic Research since 2018. The journal publishes clinical and laboratory research that clearly advances the fields of ophthalmology and vision research. And under his guidance, this journal grows substantially in publications, submissions. It increases its impact factor and successfully flipped the journal to open access in September 2020. So this will be actually the topic of today's interview, and I will hand over to Daniel for the interview again. Thank you.
Many thanks, Marco, for the introduction, and a very warm welcome, Professor Scholl. It's a great pleasure having you here today for this interview, and many thanks for taking the time to assist us in this event, because it's actually a dual event. So we're taping this interview as a part of our outside communication during Open Access Week. But this is also an event that will tell our own staff more about open access. It's of course very important that we keep everyone informed about this very important development in our industry. So we're going to talk about ophthalmic research and a process we call flipping a journal from a subscription journal to an open access journal, where subscription fees are replaced by authors' contributions, called article processing charges. This is a process that is known to be quite tricky in the industry, right? I remember maybe a couple of years ago when there were the first experience reports or case studies about flipping journal, then you could almost bet that people would say, well, we flipped it and then it lost 50% of its submissions, and if it didn't die on the way, it would have taken the journal 5 years to recover from the dent. So in the light of such uncertainties, what motivated the flip to OA for ophthalmic research at the very outset?
There are quite a number of reasons why we considered flipping to open access. One of them being outreach. I think the idea was that ophthalmic research, after flipping to open access, would have greater visibility simply from being fully open. People could access the journal freely, could download papers, that were published open access, and all papers would be published open access. So this should increase visibility. In the moment when you have greater visibility, you should have higher impact in a general way, but also specifically that more papers would be cited by other manuscripts that would be submitted in the field, and citation would increase, and certainly also the impact factor would increase. So I think these were considerations regarding outreach to the community. There were technical considerations, or we can call them administrative consideration, and it's very nice for them that now there's less delay with open access, and another similar advantage is we had page limitations before, and now we wouldn't have that any longer, flipping it to open access, and this would be much appreciated by authors, and also on the editorial board side, that we as editors of the journal could accept or reject, but could accept papers as we see them, that they fit scientifically. So I think these were considerations. It's always good to have competition in mind. We looked at certainly other journals in our space, so of ophthalmology. At the time, there was only one other Karger journal in the ophtha space that was already open access, that was Case Reports in Ophthalmology. But overall, it was pretty much exactly 20% of all journals in our field that provide that are open access. So flipping to open access would mean that we would join that, let's say, forefront of journals that would be open access, and we felt that would be a competitive advantage.
Yeah, it's great. So you were really confident this was going to be successful when you took the decision together with the publisher, because that's something we're going to address later in the conversation. Of course, it's a major decision to be taken, and given the licensing issues around open access, it's a decision that cannot be easily reverted. So what made you confident the flip was going to be successful?
We did some research before. It was actually there was actually even a paper published in our field by the Association for Research in Vision and Ophthalmology, or briefly ARVO, which is I think the most prominent academic or scientific society in our field. They are holding the largest meeting in our field in ophthalmic research. So our journal really bears exactly the name of what we stand for, ophthalmic research, and they had different models, and this society holds 3 journals. One was a hybrid format, one was completely new, and the third was open access from the beginning. And they shared their experiences in the field, which was quite interesting. We studied that, we discussed that as an editorial board, but we felt that we would do well, and we would come out of that flip to open access stronger than before, maybe with a delay, maybe with a dip. I'm sure we will discuss in a minute how it then evolved, but we were quite confident that we would do it successfully and also at the right time.
So I'm sure our audience is very curious about how it went. So the journal ended up flipping on the 15th of September in 2020. So we're looking back on just over a year of experience with open access. So how did it go? How did it turn out?
Yeah, I mean, let's give it a brief summary. The outcome was excellent, but that's the short summary, and I can give you a longer summary, of course, and I should. And in actual fact, judging or concluding from the data, if you will, is not so easy, which has to do with the fact, and you mentioned the date, September 2020, which has to do with the fact that September 2020 was we were in the midst of the so-called second wave, second COVID-19 wave in many countries, at least in the Northern Hemisphere, where we experienced the second COVID-19 wave. Why do I say that? I'm not talking about computer viruses, obviously, although open access would be vulnerable in that sense. No, but joking aside, we all know what we are talking about. We talk about the COVID pandemic, and what we, when I say we, that means the academic community has experienced in the pandemic, was that there was an overall quite significant increase in manuscripts and then also publications. And that was valid for all areas. Like in medicine, I can only speak for medicine. I'm pretty sure that it also happened in other fields in academia, but certainly in medicine and certainly in ophthalmology. And it also happened for ophthalmic research. So what happened is that we experienced a significant increase in submissions at that moment in the months just before we flipped to open access. In a sense, that was a burden in the sense that we actually wanted to see what happens with open access, and we wanted to show that we are successful, and that was quite hard because we were super successful right before we flipped to open access. So this has to be taken into account. But we have done very well. Was there you used the term dent? Was there a dent when we flipped to open access? The answer is there was a small one. There was a small dent where we actually got down to a number of submissions per time or per month that was at the level where we were before the pandemic started, but not lower than that, by the way. So essentially, we went back to baseline before the pandemic, which I think would already be a success. But it only took until April when we actually got back to levels, and then 2 months later we reached I think it was the second or third highest submission number ever of the journal. So if we summarize and just look at submissions, we see that after a dent of only 4 months, we actually reached record level submissions to Ophthalmic Research that were as high as those numbers that we reached in the pandemic and in the months before the so-called second wave. So I think this is, if we just look at submissions, this was quite a successful transition. It was actually better than we anticipated, but it happened, and obviously we're very happy about it. So if you look at overall submissions and you look at the time, we have the data for beginning of the year until September. Now we have October, but we have the previous years from the beginning of the year to September. When we look at the year 2020 we were a bit under, let's call it our baseline. Already now in the first 9 months, which means 4 months after we transitioned to open access, we are almost 50% higher than we were when we didn't have open access. I think this is a super nice outcome. Same as when we look at how much the journal was used, when we look at click rates. But that was expected. That increased significantly, because now when you open access, people can click and download publications freely. And indeed, there was a significant increase. It almost doubled. So this is something that was somewhat anticipated, but it really materialized. For me, as the editor-in-chief, there is one, let's say, one variable, one figure that is super important, because my colleagues and even myself, I'm judged against the journal quality where I publish my science. What happened is that the impact factor increased significantly. So almost by 50%. So we were under 2 in the years before we transitioned to open access, and now we are 2.9. So this is something that was not really anticipated that would happen, and at the same time our journal increased from the 3rd quartile of all journals in the field now to really in the middle of the 2nd quartile, which means that will lead to more submissions in the future, because we have higher impact factor. We are now in a higher quartile of all the journals in the field, and this correlates with attractiveness of our journal. And I don't think that there will be so much uncertainty about getting more submissions in the future. I'm sure this will happen.
Yeah, that's fantastic. So you have a very nice and successful story to tell, and when somebody has a successful story at hand, they're often being asked for advice. So what advice would you give a fellow editor-in-chief facing the decision to flip their journal?
Yeah, I'm not sure where I should start. Maybe I should start by saying you should work with a professional publisher like Karger. Which is really the case. I mean, yes, as the editor-in-chief, this is important. You give vision and direction to a journal, but you need people that implement, and you need people that have technical experience. And I think that's the case with Karger Publishers, and it's also the case with the team that Karger Publishers assigned to ophthalmology and assigned to my journal. And I think it was really a team effort to flip the journal to open access. The second was communication. So I think the immediate first group of people are my colleagues in the editorial board, the associate editors and the editorial board members. And we discussed that together. People were committed to this transition. And that helped, at least in my experience, because now I can share experience or opinions on how things could be done or should be done. All the considerations that we had before we flipped, the technical considerations to make it easier for authors and also for editors, but also have a larger outreach, which is important when you publish research. I think that these were convincing considerations that then helped to also sustain a dent if there is a dent. And our dent, fortunately, was, if there was any, was very short, 4 months or so, when we got back to record number of submissions to the journal. There may be some challenges, maybe for less funded disciplines where they may have difficulty in afford or open access. Karger has a very important program in place that I use as editor-in-chief to compensate for that. I think this is also something that is that would be my advice, that if somebody feels uncomfortable because of the business model behind open access, she or he should speak with their publishing company in the background, that they should implement such a program. For me, this was very reassuring, that if there is an issue, if we have authors, and we have had these instances, not that many, but we had them, where there was excellent science, excellent authors, but they wouldn't be able to afford, or not fully afford perhaps, to publish open access. And there was a program in place that would help. So this is something where I felt very comfortable, because this was very helpful from Karger to assist here. I think what is important, that we need to really serve the society as a journal, the scientists that publish their work, and we should lower the threshold for them. We should find solutions that allow them to make it easy, but also make it fast. This again is then being appreciated, and this attracts more people to our journal. So I think these are considerations that I have had, I'm still having, and that I can share with you in this interview, and this has helped us to go over take that route, really make it through this threshold of open access, and now be successful as an open access journal.
Maybe speed is a good topic to take us to the last question about maybe the greater scheme of things. You know, you described how COVID changed a lot of things, obviously, in our lives, but also in research and scholarly publishing, and we could observe that for example, preprints suddenly came front and center in terms of how quickly scientific findings would make it into the research community, but also into the wider community of doctors and patients. And of course, preprints address speed mainly, but I think we also saw some concerns there regarding speed versus scientific integrity and quality, which leads me to the last question. So looking beyond ophthalmic research and the good experience you had in flipping it, what do you think about the future of open access and open science? Where do you see scholarly publishing and open access in 5 or 10 years?
No, I think this is important to keep in mind what happens out there, and that those immediate publications without peer review are a reality, and it has become more difficult for scientists when they access information have access to validated information. This has become more complex, let's put it like that. I think that speed is generally positive, but you mentioned the word scholarly publishing, right? And I think this is a very important term. And we as a journal, as Ophthalmic Research, we serve the community by like a middleman, where we, through review of manuscripts, through editing editing of manuscripts. We serve the community in many directions. Back to the authors, they can improve their work and get feedback on their work, and can make and are given an opportunity to make their work better and suitable for publication. I think this is important. And for the community that is accessing the information, that would like to do a new study or would like to apply findings in a clinical setting or in the lab, they would like to have the work validated. And I think this is what the journal is providing to them, that we have review of manuscripts, and this is a validation of the data that is then published as a paper in the journal. And I should also mention, because Karger is a large, important, and technically capable publisher, that of course then the papers are being edited. It's still a difference when I see unedited publications as opposed to really edited publications, and there's a difference, and there's value to that. And I think this is the value that is given to all these stakeholders, to the authors, but to all the scientists out there that would like to access information and would like to access good information. Nice, because of the edited and published papers, but more importantly, validated information that is being published.
Thank you very much, Hendrik. So I think we should turn to the questions from the audience now. As I said, the audience is my colleagues here at Karger, and we've had a number of questions already coming in. I have one here from Christian, who is our head of academic and research markets, and the question goes in the direction of behind the scenes, seeing that the submission grows. Have there been any perceptible changes or development in terms of author base? So we mentioned, for example, that authors from some countries might not be able to afford publishing under an APC regime compared to a subscription world. So is there a difference in terms of authorship between the pre-OA and the post-OA era of ophthalmic research?
We have not observed that. Maybe I can tell my colleagues here that are dialed in that ophthalmic research gets by far the most submissions from China. So China overall is a rich country, not necessarily per capita, when you compare, let's say, to the US, but we have not seen any change. If at all, submissions may have further increased from China, but certainly have not decreased. When you look at what is being done in science out there and how this is being reflected in our journal, then ophthalmic research may have a little overrepresentation of East Asia and Europe, and maybe a bit less in North America. And saying that means in North America, we would not believe that the business model of open access would not work. If at all, we would think about, let's say, poor countries, at least per capita. As an example, India, right? India, again, it's not, of course, not a poor country because it's so large, but per capita, certainly. But we didn't have large representation from India in the first place, so we have not seen any changes there.
Mm-hmm. I have another question here from one of our heads of editorial development, Krishna. Did you get any feedback from colleagues within the field? So we know that the numbers speak for themselves and make a very nice story, but did you hear other feedback, positive, negative, or neutral about the flipping to OA with the journal?
We have heard positive feedback. Also, my editorial board members that are really happy.
Yeah, that's excellent for me to hear as well, that we can provide you with a framework and a platform as a publisher for the journal to thrive. Looking into the future for just a minute or two, I have a question here from Jesada, one of our publication managers, that is basically coming down to, does ophthalmic research attract other kinds of science or different science, maybe more innovative science, since it has flipped to OA? Or could it help accelerating new developments more than it could before it was OA?
It's a good point. Maybe we shouldn't overestimate ophthalmology, although I tend to. So it's obviously my specialty. I'm not sure if a trend that we observe now would or could be explained by the fact that ophthalmic research has flipped to open access. There's a very important trend that we have observed, and that is that the number of manuscripts around the topic myopia or short-sightedness has significantly increased. And why is that? And there are several reasons for that. Number one is that we see this. We can also call it a pandemic, the pandemic of myopia. There's even a term that is called quarantine myopia, that because of people staying at home and looking, not being outside, that process of this accelerated development of myopia has even increased during the pandemic. But myopia overall is steeply increasing worldwide. Myopia as such can be considered as a purely optical problem that you can correct with glasses and or contact lenses or refractive surgery. But in actual fact, as soon as you have higher degrees of myopia, it leads to secondary effects and will become, by the year 2050, the leading cause of blindness in the industrialized countries because of the secondary effects of myopia. So this is such an important topic, but only recently has been discovered, so to speak, as a topic. And this, and because of that, we struggle a little bit, because myopia affects the optic nerve, the retina, the lens, and so forth. And we all have these sections of the journal, cornea, glaucoma, and so forth. It was very difficult to handle myopia. So what we did, we invited and recruited, I would say, the world's most renowned clinician scientist in the field of myopia, Dr. Ono Matsui from Tokyo. And I'm super delighted that she accepted, and she will be the section editor of Ophthalmic Research for the section myopia. And I think this is a major strive of our journal to be in a strong position in the future in our field. Is that by a degree explainable that we offer open access to our authors to submit their work in the field of myopia? I don't think so, but if at all, it has a positive impact.
Okay, thank you. And also, I'm sure wrapping up this interview now, one thing you surely can say is that Karger and yourself were short-sighted in converting the journal to open access. So Professor Scholl, many thanks again for your time. I think this was hugely insightful and fun as well. Thanks to the audience for bringing up questions. We're moving into an internal part now, which is a pub quiz. Unfortunately, there will be no beer, but Professor Scholl, if you have time to stay on, please do. But I also get that you have a very dense use of your time. So thank you very much again.
Thank you very much.
All the best of luck with the journal.
Thank you very much.
Forward.
Thank you.
Thank you, Hendrik.